Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Building Green 2020 Digital Conference. Building Green is the flagship campaign of the PHILGBC events and consists of year-round activities that encourage participation in the green building advocacy. I am Mario Suelto from the PHILGBC National Secretariat and will be today's facilitator. So before we continue, please be reminded of the following event guidelines. This webinar will be recorded by the PhilGBC National Secretariat for documentation purposes. We encourage active participation during the event. You may ask your questions using the question box in the GoToWebinar panel. Questions that you will be raising will be addressed during the discussion period. Upon request, an electronic certificate of attendance will be issued by the PhilGBC National Secretariat to your registered email address. Please request a copy through events@philgbc.org. We would also like to acknowledge our BG 2020 sponsors, our Diamond Sustaining Member, Neo Property Management, and our conference sponsor, AGC Incorporated. Thank you for your sustained support. Episode 5, The Partners, will feature PhilGBC's partner organizations promoting energy efficiency and conservation, renewable energy, and green financing, among others. We recognize that there must be a coordinated action of businesses, governments, and non-government organizations to ensure the sustainability of our built environment. Today, we will be highlighting 4 organizations in our industry that are promoting energy efficiency and conservation and sustainable development, including the Philippine Energy Efficiency Alliance, or PE2, the International Finance Corporation, or IFC, ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability, and the German-Philippine Chamber of Commerce Incorporated. They will be presenting their organization's programs and current projects. So our presenters for this morning are representatives from those 4 organizations. Our first speaker for today will be Alexander Ablaza, the president of the Philippine Energy Efficiency Alliance. Over half of his 36-year professional career has been dedicated to growing energy efficiency and other clean energy investments in over 12 Asian markets. Alex has played a key role in the development of the clean energy industry in Asia by identifying and conducting due diligence for more than $3 billion in direct investments and also shaping policy, regulatory, and funding initiatives. He previously served as the Regional Sustainability and Climate Finance Specialist for Asia at the International Finance Corporation of the World Bank Group, and as the Asian Development Bank's bank-wide energy efficiency expert and coordinator of the ADB's Clean Energy Program and its predecessor, the Energy Efficiency Initiative. He founded and chairs the Asia-Pacific ESCO Industry Alliance and the Philippine Energy Efficiency Alliance. He holds a master's in business economics and a bachelor's degree in civil engineering. Alex is also the CEO for Climergy Incorporated. The next speaker will be Pushkala Ratan, the Asia lead for the climate investments in the Financial Institutions Group for IFC. Based in Singapore and working across markets in Southeast Asia, South Asia, East Asia, and the Pacific. Prior to IFC, she was with Vestas Wind Systems, where she set up and led the global carbon business, subsequently the environmental financial products business for Deutsche Bank, and the clean technology business for the German technical leader TÜV Süd Asia Pacific. She has extensive experience in sustainable finance across investments, policy or regulations, strategy and technical services in Asia, the US, Europe, and the Middle East, and has a PhD in the Indian Institute of Technology. Our next presenter will be Jose Bernardo Gochoco III, the Project Officer for Adaptation of ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability Southeast Asia Secretariat. He has been working with local governments on climate change adaptation and mitigation and disaster risk reduction and management. He is also overseeing the implementation and monitoring of climate change adaptation and mitigation projects of ICTE, including the Accelerate project. Our last speaker for this morning is Charlotte Bandalo, the Deputy Executive Director and Head of Trade Promotion for the German-Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry. She joined GPCCI in 2012 and has been responsible for the business consultancy services of the Chamber since 2014 as department head. She has profound experience in project management, in market entry consulting, and cooperation with other institutions and partners with regards to trade promotion activities. She has guided numerous business missions and companies from Germany to the Philippines and vice versa to foster bilateral trade relations. In 2017, Charlotte was appointed Deputy Executive Director of GPCCI, which currently has a headcount of more than 20 employees. In addition to business English, Ms. Pandelo speaks German and Tagalog due to her German-Philippine background and has an excellent understanding of intercultural differences. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Asian Studies, focused on Southeast Asia from the Rheinig Friedrich Wilhelm University Bonn, and is currently undergoing her Regis MBA program from Ateneo Graduate School of Business. So we'll now jump into the agenda and our first speaker for this morning, Mr. Alex Ablaza from PE2. Alex, let me pass now the control to you and the audio.
Thank you, Mario, and good morning to all. This morning I wear two hats. As Mario has rightly introduced, I represent the Philippine Energy Efficiency Alliance, but I'd also like to bring in my co-chair hat of the Asia Pacific ESCO Industry Alliance, because we know that the ESCO industry will be a very valuable channel of climate capital, green and sustainable climate finance through most developing Asian markets, especially for the commercial and industrial energy end use sectors. This morning, I speak about what PE2 and APIA have been doing in positioning energy efficiency as a stimulus in a post-COVID-19 economic recovery. We want to share with you the proposed policy-based approach specific for the Philippines energy efficiency market. Just to introduce the two organizations, APIA has been established in June 2018. We now have 8 country ESCO associations, those of China, India, Japan, Korea, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Taiwan. And we're now reaching out to the ESCO associations, ESCO communities of Thailand and Vietnam. This is to create a regional platform to facilitate exchange of knowledge, to develop more nascent ESCO sectors, to facilitate carbon market transactions, to ease deployment of energy efficiency technologies, facilitate investments and develop cross-border business, and to enable market interventions, especially for those with less developed ESCO capacities. Philippine Energy Efficiency Alliance actually has a 14-year history growing from the previous or the predecessor, the ESCO Association of the Philippines. We have a 4-point approach towards a long-term transformation of the energy efficiency market. We have created an ecosystem of multi-energy efficiency market stakeholders, including ESCOs, technology solutions, service providers, professional services, financial institutions, equity and financial services, nonprofits, as well as large organizations which have mainstreamed energy efficiency in their core activities. Together, we push for policy reform. I think our biggest achievement here was to partner with government to get the energy efficiency bill. After languishing 29 years in the halls of Congress, we got it signed as a law in April 2019. But we continue to position ourselves to partner with government to formulate and enforce other energy efficiency bridge policies and long-term roadmaps in a public-private collaborative model. With the passage of the Energy Efficiency Law, otherwise known as Republic Act 11285, we join the many countries right now that are dispatching energy efficiency as a primary resource in the energy mix. We'd like to build on the model created by the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, the pie chart that you see on the right side of the screen, where energy efficiency is planned and estimated and treated as a primary resource. PE2 is positioning um, energy efficiency as not only a primary resource, but as infrastructure in the broader context, in the way that government plans, programs, disburses, and implements energy efficiency project as a new infrastructure asset class. The Philippine energy efficiency capital requirements is estimated to be roughly $243 billion between now and 2040. About a third of this, or 4 trillion pesos, will be mobilized through what we call the business as usual capital mobilization modalities. Either end users self-finance them, other banks lend through debt capital, or leasing companies who flow leasing capital, and other on-balance sheet modalities. But both APIA and PE2 believe that the lion's share, or two-thirds, amounting to something like 8 trillion pesos or 160 billion US dollars, will have to flow through off-balance sheet capital flows, through non-bank vehicles, through ESCO performance contracts, through public-private partnership transactions, through joint venture agreements, through large-scale government retrofit programs, and other modalities flowing energy efficiency capital outside the balance sheet of the energy end user. We are picking up from a paper of the International Energy Agency, which was released in the 8th of April this year, positioning energy efficiency as an economic stimulus and presenting strategic consideration for policymakers. So what IEA has actually circulated in early April was that energy efficiency actions can support the goals of economic stimulus programs, that governments can deliver stimulus at scale and speed, that there are many important market considerations in pushing energy efficiency as a stimulus activity, and that government can facilitate better outcomes from large-scale investment programs, such as the forced obsolescence of low-efficiency technologies. So this IEA paper inspired a PE2 position statement presented to different sides of government, including the executive branch led by the planning agency called NEDA, the energy ministry called the Department of Energy, and both chambers of Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate of the Philippines. In the position statement of the 23rd of April, PE2 positioned energy efficiency as a cost-effective and swift job generator. PE2 also said that energy efficiency, compared to infrastructure and other stimulus activities, has proven speed of delivering economic impacts. Unlike infrastructure, which poses local environmental impact, there's very minimal local environmental impact for energy efficiency projects. We also say that the energy efficiency is the most cost-effective GHG abatement strategy compared to renewables, fuel switches, and other mitigation strategies. For the Philippine market, accelerated spending in public building energy efficiency will need the mobilization of over $1 billion or 66 billion pesos to shave off 1.6 terawatt hours a year. But the Philippines can leverage from over 2 decades experience in energy efficiency market transformation, assisted by IFC, ADB, UNDP, UNIDO, and other international development players. Government financial institutions such as Land Bank and DBP will need to scale up concessional energy efficiency lending. But we like to build on the fact that the economy will need to mobilize 12 trillion pesos in the next 20 years. This will be facilitated by the fact that we now have an energy efficiency law in place that switches the end-use market into a mandatory policy regime. And that paves the way now for innovative flows, treating energy efficiency as a new asset class, as a new infrastructure project type. We also recommended a 55 billion peso or $1.1 billion funding package for energy efficiency as part of the economic stimulus bill that is still pending in Congress. You might have read in the news that there was a Bayanihan 2 bill that was signed into law in the recent days. This is just the first stage. There is still a more comprehensive economic stimulus package that is still pending in both chambers of Congress. So what we're telling the economic stimulus response package cluster of the Defeat COVID-19 Special Committee of the House of Representatives is that if we tuck in a $1 billion energy efficiency component, we are able to promote employment generating industries as a declaration of policy. That we will strengthen the ability of two government financial institutions to flow energy efficiency lending at more concessional terms. And that the development of government energy efficiency projects, accelerated spending in them, would enable more development impacts and market development impacts for job generation. On the 4th of May, the Department of Energy issues a no objection statement to the position of PE2. In early May, PE2 conducted a job survey in the energy efficiency sector. And on the left side of the screen, we see a whole wide array or range of job classifications that energy efficiency investments are able to create, from the very upstream importation, manufacture, and assembly, all the way down to downstream installation, construction, testing, operation, maintenance, and asset management, and all other jobs in between, which includes inspection, warehousing, energy audits, engineering, procurement. So there are many job classifications from upstream to downstream energy efficiency activities. What the survey also reveals is that a low of 18 jobs to a high of 200 jobs are created by energy efficiency investments in the Philippines, ranging from $1 million or 50 million pesos to $4 million or 200 million pesos in project size. Energy efficiency job generation in other jurisdictions have shown energy efficiency to be truly labor intensive. In the United States, the largest contributor of new jobs created in the energy sector in 2019 was energy efficiency. In the last 3 years, energy efficiency contributed a large 45 to 55% of new jobs in the US energy sector, outsizing that of renewables, oil and gas, and the power sector. There was also a survey of 35 energy efficiency programs and stimulus packages across the EU, the UK, the US, and Canada. And the survey concludes that an average of 19.3 jobs were created for every 1 million euros invested in energy efficiency. So the finding of PE2 now is that energy efficiency compared to the infrastructure program of the Philippines called Build, 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 we've determined that energy efficiency creates 45% more jobs than infrastructure for the same amount of stimulus or conventional investment funding. And this was contained in the PE2 position statement to Congress on the 1st of June. So if you see the bottommost row of the tabulation, under the Build, Build, Build infrastructure program, we determined that 25, close to 26 jobs are created for every $1 million for energy, transport, and water infrastructure projects. But for energy efficiency, every $1 million are able to create over 37 jobs for every $1 million of stimulus or mainstream investment funding. So we are telling Congress that if we want to accelerate economic recovery, while infrastructure development projects are good, energy efficiency will be a very useful, cost-effective complement in creating more jobs alongside the mainstream infrastructure project development. In conclusion, while governments tend to prioritize infrastructure projects, and that is good, we really need to accelerate spending in or mobilizing capital, whether public or private, in energy, transport, and water infrastructure, there's still a clear, more sustainable, climate-friendly pathway to create more jobs, and that is through energy efficiency. So whether or not energy efficiency is explicitly included in economic stimulus legislation, there are still other policy measures and interventions and policy reform opportunities to include energy efficiency and have the same effect of accelerated government spending in energy efficiency, especially for energy efficiency in public buildings at both national and local government levels, as well as government-owned and controlled corporations and state universities and college. So I close there, but I would be very much I would very much welcome your questions later in the episode during the Q&A. Back to you, Mario.
Thank you very much, Alex. So we'll now move to our next presenter for this morning, Pushkala Ratan from IFC. So let me open your material, Pushkala. And let me now pass the audio and control to you.
Thank you, Mario. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak this morning. I would like to give you a little bit of an overview in terms of how we are seeing the climate finance space, particularly also in the Philippines. I think Alex set the tone very well for this session, which is that there is a lot more that we need to do in the climate space beyond just renewables. And there is, of course, an enormous opportunity to do that as well, as long as, of course, it's in the right policy, finance, and regulatory framework to enable it to happen. So I'd like to start with what we did in terms of just an assessment of the climate opportunity in emerging markets. And this was based on an internal IFC study. And we were really surprised at the results of what we found. So clearly, of course, the investment opportunity is about 23 trillion in terms of emerging markets where there is a funding gap or where finance is required. But perhaps more interesting in this study was where this was going to come from. And most of it is in the East Asia Pacific region. And also, I think of interest is the segments within which we would find this climate finance opportunity. And buildings is one of the key areas where we are seeing possibly the most activity now, and we'll continue to see a lot of activity as we go forward with all the urbanization that is happening, especially in countries in Asia. So I think one of the main messages really from this slide is that renewables have been a mainstay for several years now. And in a lot of countries, I would say, it's now considered a very mature technology. It's an area that now people understand. They're able to mitigate risks. They're able to finance it. It's on par with conventional power in many countries. But I think the interest is now moving towards what else can be done. And with buildings, transport, transmission, distribution, because of, of course, very weak grids or distribution systems that have been there in place for a substantial period of time in many countries, there are now multiple opportunities that these pose as well. Now, in industrial energy efficiency, I think this is also quite an interesting area along with waste and water. Energy efficiency can be, of course, extremely wide, and it's I think, an area that's untapped largely. There is energy efficiency relating to SMEs, but also larger industrial energy efficiency. And the same goes with waste and water, because I think we're just at the tip of what we can potentially do in terms of climate finance. So the opportunity is definitely enormous. And we're in the region perhaps where it's most likely to see scale compared to many other regions. And it's also interesting to see that segment-wise, there's going to be a big diversification in terms of where this finance will be going towards. Next slide, please. I'd like to particularly speak also about the green bond market, which is an area where we have focused on and worked in quite a bit over the last couple of years. And I think the green bond market is quite interesting given the kind of liquidity and capital and scale that we require for climate finance to kind of achieve that $23 trillion opportunity. So the green bond market, of course, has grown substantially since 2015. And it's now, I would say, even though there's COVID, and this is a question I get asked very often, how is it affecting the green bond segment, say, in the last 6 or 7 months? We haven't seen a very large or tremendous difference in terms of the issuance of green bonds. We're seeing a lot more sustainability bonds as well, because there are lots of the use of proceeds going towards COVID-related activities. But there's definitely a very big interest that continues in climate and green, regardless of the current situation. I think there's growing awareness as well that climate change is perhaps as serious an issue as COVID, or even more, in terms of the impact that it would have, not only in terms of markets and economies, but also in terms of just individual portfolios, corporate lending, bank lending, and many other segments. So it's definitely a market that continues to grow and will continue to grow, and also a market where you're not only going to have developed countries or developed country FIs or corporates issuing green bonds, but we're seeing a lot more emerging market issuers come into the market as well. And they're really leading the way in terms of the green bond issuance, not only now, but will continue to as we go forward. Next slide, please. So just to take a step back in terms of climate finance as a whole, I think, as I said, a lot of people immediately think about renewables, but I think it's a lot more than that. And in terms of universally accepted definitions, so when you look at the green bond space, for example, there are the green bond standards or the green bond principles. We also have the green loan principles, and they're all aligned in terms of what constitutes the use of proceeds and what is considered eligible or eligible climate projects. So it's very, very wide. And that's, I would say, the key message really, because in a number of, I would say, instances or our experience that we've seen so far, a number of people are already really investing in climate, but they didn't know they were. So there's already a comfort around a number of these sectors, for example, but to just kind of move towards that transition towards green is not as difficult as people imagine that it is or would be. And I think buildings is one area where we've seen this very, very often in terms of either new green buildings or existing green buildings that are being made green. We see a huge opportunity in terms of climate finance and also people's, I would say, perception of what could be done to achieve that. So climate finance is broad. It's a constantly evolving definition. And in many, many cases, I think if we want to kind of scale this opportunity, we'll also have to think about how we constantly evolve this to scale impact along with that. Next slide, please. I won't spend too much time on this, but essentially IFC does three things in the overall in terms of the business and also particularly in climate. So one, of course, is the mainstay, which is on the investment side. We do all the financial products that you would have in any commercial transaction, for example, but kind of tying it to the climate piece, as long as the use of proceeds goes towards green, then it would be considered climate finance. We also have, of course, some blended finance that we do in terms of concessional finance with donors or any other organizations that may be working with us. The advisory part of our work is a large part of what we do because there are various corporates, various FIs, I would say at levels of sophistication that differ depending on their own understanding or strategy towards climate. So a lot of the work that we do is on the advisory side in terms of getting them up to speed or getting them to understand where the opportunity is and how they could take advantage of that. And of course, the mobilization piece is important as well. So in a number of instances, and I'll give some examples later, IFC does go in as an anchor investor, but we also are able to mobilize in terms of either loans or bonds, other players in the market, and that would be one of our key areas that we add value as well. Next slide, please. But in addition to this, I think, of course, as we all, I would say, recognize, there are various levels of this ecosystem that have to work together. There are various pieces that need to come together as well. And in this particular instance, say on the climate side, we do realize the importance of policy and regulatory support. So this is something we've seen in renewables over the years in different markets. And we'll need to start seeing this in various other areas as well, or various other climate segments. So we do work quite a bit on the policy regulatory support side, also in terms of creating that enabling environment. So take the example of green bonds. It could be working with the capital market, say stakeholders in that particular country or institutions to ensure or enable or kickstart that particular market or get it going. And of course, then work with, for instance, from my side on the banks and financial institutions to kind of filter it down to the private sector level and see how we can scale or mobilize adequate capital for what needs to be done. So there are various parts that need to come together, and climate is one of those areas where you do need all these to come together for it to be effective and to work. And there are several examples, not only with IFC, but several other institutions where this has all kind of worked together very cohesively and has had a lot of impact in terms of kickstarting the climate finance market and taking it forward. Next slide, please. Just a quick, I would say, overall assessment of where we are. So we are definitely, climate is a very important part of what we do and important part of our mandate. So it already forms about 28 to 30% of the overall IFC investments that we do. But the goals are, of course, definitely to scale up and are very ambitious as well. So I think it becomes, as I mentioned, also important to look at it from all the various perspectives. The policy side, how do you diversify your climate asset? And of course, how do you do different types of financial products to kind of enable or reach this very ambitious number? So it's a different approaches for different countries and different markets, but clearly, as you saw in the first slide, a big opportunity to kind of scale these numbers to much higher than where they are. Next slide, please. We also did a survey in terms of analyzing where institutions were putting their investments or what was the asset class that they were most comfortable with. So definitely, as you would imagine, renewables is top of the line. So we see that in a lot of our investments as well. Most of the investment goes towards renewable energy projects. Has gone a lot to solar and wind, I would say, over the years, but of course also diversifying into biomass and rooftop solar now, which are becoming also areas of interest. Energy efficiency has been a sector where institutions have lent to, but they all clearly acknowledge that this is an area that has to grow, or they have to do much more in this. And you can see that there are a number of other areas that are coming in as well in terms of where these investments are going towards. Of particular interest are things like, for example, climate smart agriculture, which is an area which is very niche, very new, but there are a number of countries, markets, and corporates and FIs who are looking into this very seriously. And there is definitely, it's not as small a sector as it seems. It's quite a niche sector, but definitely an opportunity for scale as well. So I would say this is just to give you an idea of what financial institutions particularly are investing in and what they're looking towards. And clearly there's a very, very strong motivation to continue lending to climate and also diversifying where they will put this money in. Next slide, please. Thank you. I just want to speak very briefly about a web platform that IFC has, which is proprietary to IFC, and it has gone through, I would say, various levels of evolution over the last few years. But it's essentially the climate assessment for financial institutions. And it's a very helpful tool that we use with our clients. And it primarily helps, I would say, in two things. One, of course, is in reporting, which is important and necessary because we need to see what is really the development impact of all these activities that are being financed. So the software comes with all the preloaded methodology, the different types of technology, different types of countries, and all just the very minimum data really has to be put in to get the output, which is the emission reductions. But it's also interesting because a number of our clients use it in terms of climate eligibility. So to determine whether the particular project that they're looking at, for instance, is even eligible under the climate definitions that I showed you earlier. So CAFI has been a very effective tool for us in terms of measuring the impact of a lot of these investments that I talked about earlier as well, a lot of the sectors as well. So in renewables, for example, or energy efficiency, to a certain extent, I think it's possible to measure the emissions or to have a very clear, direct, straightforward methodology to do that. But in areas like climate smart agriculture, for example, it can be a little bit harder. So this tool is constantly evolving, but I think the important thing is not only, as I mentioned, to have that opportunity in climate finance, but also to measure the impact of what's actually being done or what's coming out of that. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I'm just going to skip this. Thank you. So I would say one important thing also to mention here is CAFI is harmonized across different institutions, so it's universally recognized or accepted in terms of the reporting methodology. And for several of the green bonds as well, so it's also harmonized in terms of the green bond reporting. So a number of the clients who say have done a green bond can report through CAFI in terms of where the money was used for and what was the impact, instead of having to adopt any other or any special software or any other process for that. So it is, I think, fairly useful also in terms of just annual reports or shareholder reporting or investor reporting that a number of the clients do. And particularly as well, of course, as I mentioned, it helps to determine the eligibility of assets that go in if clients are looking to build their climate capacity. And this is something, of course, especially in newer areas like energy efficiency or even green buildings for that matter, this part of that knowledge is extremely important to kind of get a better handle in terms of what qualifies and what doesn't. Just a last few slides in terms of actual cases that we have worked on, which may be interesting. So we recently did a sustainability bond, I would say, because it was both a gender bond and a green bond with OCBC and ISP in Indonesia. This was the second bond that we had done with OCBC. So let me try and now kind of relate it to what I said earlier. In Indonesia, IFC worked with the regulators and with the banking regulators specifically, especially on green guidelines. So we worked a lot in terms of that enabling environment, helping to create the market with other players as well, and also helping to then bring that to an FI level or client level, which was with OCBC. And we went ahead and were an anchor investor in the first bond that was issued by a commercial FI in Indonesia. And that was 100% climate used towards different types of projects. This one specifically, after that, OCBC kind of realized that they had a very strong inclination towards building their green building segment, and they wanted to focus that. Their strategic focus was in that area. So the second bond was really focused towards the green building segment, and this was also with the use of a blended finance facility, which I had talked about briefly earlier. And this was with the UK government's program called MAGIC, which we have with them. And this is based on, of course, performance targets and stretch targets as well to enable OCBC to use this blended finance facility. So we also have a technical assistance program that's in the works. So also in terms of, say, building that capacity or helping OCBC develop that capacity to build their green buildings program. I wanted to also speak to you briefly about BDO, of course, which is one of our flagship projects. It was the first one that we did in the Philippines, and it was, again, 100% green bond where IFC was an anchor investor. And subsequent to the BDO investment, there have been several others that have, of course, come into the Philippines market, and that has been very heartening to see. We have been involved in some of them, of course. But this was also an interesting one because this was the first one in the market. It really helped to kind of establish Philippines as a player in the green bonds market. And it was a sizable bond. A lot of it was used for renewable energy projects. But this also was an interesting example because IFC helped a lot on the advisory side before BDO was ready to issue the bond. So this is also a great example, I think, of investment and the advisory aspects going together. Next slide, and I think this is my last one. So the again, an example of a bond that was done in India, but particularly on residential buildings. And this was, again, where we were an anchor investor in this particular deal. But I think it was interesting because it's the first one that was done out of India, particularly focused on green bonds related to green buildings. So as a lot of you may know, perhaps IFC has the EDGE program, which is again, a proprietary certification tool that we have, which is very easily accessible for everyone. You can just go online and see that. There are lots of reports and data as well. And all these transactions that I just talked about have used EDGE in terms of certification, which works out simpler, quicker, and faster than the typical, say, lead or pream for a number of our clients. Of course, different people have different preferences, but this particular example, and of course, the one with OCBC, are with the EDGE certification for all the transactions or projects that come under the bond. And I think the last one is for Banco Colombia. So I'll just leave you with this. This was the first transaction that we had done in Latin America, but it's worthy to mention this because, again, this was a green buildings related green bond, and there have been several others now that have come into the Colombian market since. So it really helped to jumpstart that market, and particularly Banco Colombia is a big advocate of EDGE, of certification, and of building green buildings that are not only, of course, commercial or but also residential and several other types. So they've been a big advocate of green buildings in the market and have really played a large role in terms of getting the market going. So thank you again very much for your attention. I'm very glad to be here, and I do hope that you found this session useful, because I think it was overall just to give you an idea in terms of different segments that are coming in or that we're seeing in the market in climate finance, and particularly what we're seeing on the finance part of it. I think it's very exciting at this point of time to be in this. And clearly, as we go to a green recovery and we see more and more green stimulus coming in as well, I think this will form a large part of what we will be doing. So clearly an opportunity, and I think Philippines perhaps is well positioned to do a lot of the work that we're already seeing picking up in the region. Thank you very much, and back to you, Mario.
Thank you very much, Pashkala. So we'll now move to our next presenter from ICLE. So let me now pass the presentation to BJ Gochoco from ICLE.
So good morning, everyone. My name is BG Gochoco from ICLE, Local Governments for Sustainability. So for my presentation, I will be introducing ICLE first, and then some of our projects dealing with green building and energy efficiency and climate mitigation. So next slide. Oh, okay. So ICLE Local Governments for Sustainability is the leading global network of 1,500 cities, towns, and regions committed to building a sustainable future. So through our collective efforts, we impact more than 24% of the global urban population. So ICLE was founded in 1990 as the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, and in 2003, the organization changed its name to ICLE Local Governments for Sustainability to better reflect the current challenges local governments face, which is the broader topic of sustainability. ICLE offices around the world include the World Secretariat in Bonn, Germany, and of course, the Southeast Asia Secretariat located in the Philippines. ICLE Southeast Asia Secretariat is based in Manila, Philippines, and currently serves members in Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Thailand. Established in 1999, ICLE began its work in the region with the Cities for Climate Protection campaign in the Philippines, which was expanded to Thailand and Indonesia in 2002. Since then, ICLE membership has grown rapidly in these three countries, leading to the establishment of the Indonesia office in 2013 and adding Malaysia into the fold in 2014. In 2016, ICLE started its presence in Vietnam and Laos. Right now, the ICLE follows the 5 ICLE pathways: low emission development, nature-based development, equitable and people-centered development, resilient development, and circular development. The ICLE pathways is an international process designed to alter the status quo by shifting the function or structure to an identified system with purposeful interventions. Systems change aims to bring about lasting change by altering underlying structures and supporting mechanisms which make the system operate in a particular way. These can include policies, routines, relationships, resources, power structures, and values. So to keep in line with the theme of the conference, we will focus more on the low emission development pathway. As part of the low emission development, ICLE members must strive to curb climate change and create new economic opportunities to improve the health of people and natural systems at the same time. As a minimum, ICLE members must commit to implement the Paris Climate Agreement goal of keeping global warming well below 2 degrees Celsius and pursue all efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. We want our ICLE members and many more cities to achieve climate neutrality in municipal infrastructure and operations before mid-century, and to actively promote the renewable energy era by divesting from fossil fuels and by committing to 100% renewable energy by using nature-based solutions. So in this next part, I will be highlighting some of our current projects on climate mitigation and energy efficiency. The first project that I will be highlighting is the emissions. The Promise of Seoul is a comprehensive climate strategy adopted by the Seoul Metropolitan Government at the ICLE Congress in 2015, and will be the heart of ambitious these promises. It provides a model of effective climate action at the community level, showing that cities can be both engines of growth and global leaders on climate action by establishing inclusive, low-emission urban economies. Through the ambitious city promises, local governments in Southeast Asia adapt this model of inclusive, ambitious climate action, mainstreaming low-emission development strategies and creating climate leaders. By spreading the vision behind the promise of Seoul, ambitious cities promises show how collective action taken in cities with leadership from local governments can contribute to achieving and ratcheting up national and global climate goals. ACP is implemented in cities across the Philippines, Indonesia, and Vietnam. These cities are taking action by receiving support and establishing and implementing ambitious greenhouse gas emission reduction commitments and local climate action plans. The sites in the Philippines include Parañaque and Marikina as the satellite cities, while Pasig City serves as the model city. Here are some of the activities done for the ACP. So we've currently finished updating the city level GHG inventory of Pasig. So we found out that 86% of their GHG emission comes from the stationary energy sector. We also have we are also helping the city with their implementing rules and regulation of the local green building ordinance, which is currently being drafted with ACP support. Integration and promotion of ENC in the building sector are expected to be major components of the RERR. ENC also aligns with existing national policies relevant to green buildings such as the Philippine Green Building Code, the guidelines for energy conserving design of buildings and utility systems, and the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act. We also have an infrastructure pilot project. The pilot project shall include unit installations of lighting and cooling systems, rooftop solar photovoltaic systems, and a portable biogas digester that showcase green building solutions that respond to efficient energy and resource use, enhance occupants' productivity, and contribute to GHG reduction. This is currently being implemented in the selected public buildings in Barangay Santa Rosa, Pasig City. And lastly, we also help the cities to access finance. As an offshoot of the ACP, a project proposal with strong thematic focus on ENC was submitted for funding by the 10YFP Sustainable Lifestyles and Education Program of the Ministry of Environment of Japan. More on this later. So the project is titled Active City Community Engagement to Leverage Emissions Reduction through Activities that Transform Energy Use, or you can call it Accelerate. So the project Accelerate will run from September 2019 to March 2021 with the goal of strengthening sustainable consumption and production of energy in Pasig and Parañaque by enhancing the implementation of the Philippine Green Building Code and improving ENC across the board by inspiring action from the private sector and the local communities. Through the Accelerate project, participating cities will institutionalize sustainable energy practices in the building sector with input and engagement from relevant stakeholders. We will also provide capacity building by training local government technical staff on how to conduct basic energy audits and the use of benchmarking tools. Hopefully, the learnings from this will be incorporated in the improvement of their building permit approval processes in their respective cities. Through the Accelerate project, we also develop EENC knowledge resources. So one of that will be the online platform, which will serve as a repository for knowledge products useful for stakeholders to facilitate the engagement with policymakers, private sector, and city residents. And another offline portion of the advocacy part will be the energy advocates, which will go house to house and business to business to educate and advocate for ENC practices while functioning as a feedback loop for the energy concerns of the communities. And lastly, we also developed two knowledge products, the Energy Guidebook for Energy Advocates and Chuchai Learns to Save Energy comic books. So the website and the comic book and the guidebook will be launched next week, also through the PHILGBC conference. Next, we have the Urban LEDs, or Accelerating Climate Action through the Promotion of Urban Low Emission Development Strategies. UN Habitat and ICLEI are supporting more than 60 local governments worldwide tackling climate change by accelerating urban low emission development and climate change resilience for their communities through multi-level governance approach to integrated urban climate action. In 2012 to 2015, ICLEI and UN Habitat supported model cities in Brazil, India, Indonesia, South Africa to develop urban low-emission development strategies and action plans using ICLEI's Green Climate Cities process methodology. In 2017, a second phase of the project was launched. This new phase includes an addition of 23 model and satellite cities in Colombia, Bangladesh, Laos, and Rwanda. While the core objective remains to contribute to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions through the development of city-level urban low-emission development strategies, a strengthened focus on adaptation and climate resilience will ensure a comprehensive climate and development approach. At the city level, the project will support model cities and satellite cities per country. And in countries added in phase 2, the project will provide capacity building and technical cooperation to help the model cities develop their urban low emission development strategies and action plans. In the cities engaged in phase 1, the key activities will center around supporting model cities in beginning to implement their development plans, including investment strategies and continued measuring, reporting, and verification of results. The next project is the ASAP cells, or the Access to Sustainable Energy Clean Energy Living Laboratories. So ASAP cells is a think tank funded by the European Union and implemented by the Ateneo School of Government in partnership with the Manila Observatory, ICLEI-SEAS, Xavier University, and University of San Carlos. It supports the Department of Energy in achieving 100% rural electrification through renewable energy, increasing the share of RE in the country's energy mix, and promoting energy efficiency towards sustainable and inclusive growth. So what is the role of ICLEI Southeast Asia here? ICLEI will help mainstream national energy policies and plans at the local planning and development. ICLEI will also help build capacity of dedicated technical working group of selected local government employees to develop a local energy plan. ICLEI will also assist the LGU through a technical working group to craft and a project proposal for an energy project with an EE and RE component, and also to provide learning sessions through LGU to LGU cooperation or expert guidance. Part of the activities in mainstreaming national energy policies include support on educating local governments about their mandates on national energy policies, an example of which is the DOE's Energy Efficiency and Conservation Forums that ICLEI-SEAS is supporting and co-organizing. Next, we have the Building Efficiency Accelerator. The BEA is a global partnership designed to complement existing networks of cities with a venue for engagement with private sector partners. The BEA's process of engagement in a city includes support for assessing and prioritizing locally appropriate policies and actions, implementing actions by matching needs with expertise, resources, and tools, and tracking action and documenting progress and sharing lessons learned. The BEA engages with cities through a menu of policy options and key actions based on the needs of the city and the activities that the partnership can provide in each location. Cities will prioritize policies and activities, and the partnership will connect them to resources and engagement around those priorities. The World Resources Institute has engaged ICLEI-SEAS to lead the collaboration with BEA Southeast Asia cities, namely Da Nang in Vietnam, Iskandar in Malaysia, Mandaluyong, Science City of Muñoz, Pasig, and Santa Rosa in the Philippines. Through BEA, we have supported BEA Southeast Asia cities to share best practices on building and energy efficiency. Likewise, we have capacitated selected BEA Philippine cities on basic energy building audit, kickstarted the process of formulating a green building ordinance. So Philippine Green Building Council is also a partner for the BEA. And that will conclude my presentation. I will be happy to answer all your questions later. Thank you, Mario. Back to you.
Thank you very much, BJ. So again, to everyone, if you have questions to any of our presenters for this morning, please send in your questions using the question panel in your GoToWebinar app. So let's now move on to our last presenter for this morning. We have Charlotte Bandelo from the German-Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So let me just pull up the presentation. So Charlotte, let me pass now the audio and the control to you.
Thank you, Mario. First and foremost, I would like to thank the Philippine Green Building Council for inviting us, the German-Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It is an honor for us to be included in this lineup of partners. Although as a broad chamber, we're a little bit different to the other partners. But of course, sustainability is, I would genuinely say, one of our favorite topics. So I'm happy to introduce the German-Philippine Chamber of Commerce. Now, the chamber belongs to a network, a global network of 140 chambers in 92 countries. We're called the German Chambers Abroad. And altogether, we have around 50,000 members globally and the network exists already since 125 years. So usually the German Chambers Abroad consist of 3 pillars or have 3 main functions, which is the membership organization. In the German-Philippine Chamber, we have around 300 members. We are also a service provider. So usually we do market entry and expansion services, but not only in energy efficiency and renewable energy and many different topics and industries. And lastly, we are the official representation of German industry abroad. So our main principle is actually the German Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy in Germany. And yeah, so we represent them here in the Philippines. So our typical services are, like a membership organization. We have knowledge events and roundtables. As mentioned, we help in market entry. So usually it's market studies or business partner searches. So we connect businesses. And we also facilitate public projects on behalf of the Ministry of Energy in Germany, which are usually business missions. We also facilitate special projects. I have an example with me later, and are very much engaged in the training and education field, since it's also one probably USP from Germany, the dual vocational training and education. And of course, as a chamber has advocacy work. So here you see a rough overview of our membership. We have a very diverse profile, so German and Philippine companies alike. We are a bilateral chamber and have many companies, for example, in the maritime and logistics sector, also in manufacturing, but I would say most of them are in the trading business. So also we have numerous renewable energy firms, just to name a few: Energisto, Matec, PHILGBC, PV2 Servoelectric, Siemens and Triconti. So there's some technology providers from Germany already here. Also, we have more and more members from the manufacturing sector looking into energy efficiency measures to improve their plants. So that's a very interesting development now. Now, what's the connection to Germany? I think Germany has a rather green reputation and can share some experiences and also experiences from mistakes. So we had green policies since 40 years and this famous energy transition, and where the country tried to be less dependent from oil and transition to more renewable energy. So currently, we are still reducing emissions. Since 1990, we reduced 27%. Also, we have energy efficiency measures for buildings, especially in also industrial applications, which are being developed, as Germany is also famous for the brand Industry 4.0. And we are looking into enhancing e-mobility, extending also the electricity grid, and finding new employment opportunities in this sector. So the promotion of renewable energy and energy efficiency started already in the 90s. The history and the promotion of it resulted into a strong and established industry consisting of several hundred SMEs, specialized in research, development, design, and production of sustainable energy solutions and technology. Now, even and with the COVID-19 economic recovery package of Germany, we have measures to improve efficiency in buildings and also in industry, the direct use of renewable energy and sector coupling promoted in the recovery package of the country, which I found very interesting. Now, for our activities here in the Philippines, we of course build on strong partnerships. So, of course, I mentioned our main principle is the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy in Germany, and also who's actively promoting in an initiative to bring German SMEs abroad and find new markets. And then on our side also is always the German embassy, especially the commercial counselor, who's very into energy efficiency and renewable technology. Also, we build on strong partnerships with the GIZ. So a few years back, we have developed the German Solar Training Week to market also technologies and explain technologies applications better in the market. But that's already long ago. And on the Philippine side, we look, of course, to good cooperation with the Philippine Green Building Council when we have our business missions coming in, for example, in the matching. And also we work with the Renewable Energy Associations of the Philippines. Now, some examples of our activities. We usually organize an energy roundtable on behalf of our members, and the industry raises then certain concerns. So last meeting was last October and November. So the industry raised their questions to USEC Posadas with regard to the policies and changes which were implemented recently. Also, we are very happy about our project, the Green Finance Bootcamp. So we have developed a training with a green finance specialist, and where we help companies to help in their feasibility studies and the preparation of project documentations to apply for green finance opportunities. And we've cooperated with the BDO Bank and also the German political foundation Friedrich Naumann Foundation. So we had two versions last year, December. It was still in a physical meeting. Now in March, we held it as a webinar, as a training webinar. And what we usually do is the business missions. So, for example, we had in March, when traveling was still possible, a Philippine delegation consisting of around 10 business representatives who went to Germany and traveled around the federal state of North Rhine-Westphalia and had a look on certain applications and companies and see behind the curtains. Also, we usually organize the business missions coming from Germany to the Philippines, who are always looking for Philippine counterparts for accessing the market and also introducing new technologies and new business models. So this is a picture. We had to do it virtually. It was quite successful. So aside from webinar where they introduced their technologies and solutions, we also organized B2B meetings, individual ones via Zoom. And of course, it's nicer if it was a physical meeting where you can shake the hand of your counterpart. But I think for the constraints, this was a very nice event. Now, what we are also working currently is a project in cooperation with our member with regard to biogas technicians, since we see there is not or there are no education programs yet available for this job profile. So we're in close cooperation with our members and other stakeholders, and to come up with an education program that with biogas technicians that can help in the construction, the maintenance, and the safe handling of biogas plants that are using German technology. Yes, so we're happy to be part in the transformation also in the Philippines. Now, why we do this? So I think the German companies are having a good reputation and added value technology for markets where the potential is so high for applications like in the Philippines. And the German Philippine Chamber also is part of the UN Global Compact, the Philippine chapter, and we see our activities, which are all concerning sustainability, as our contribution. So for us, the Philippines is more than a market. Now, just some upcoming events. So we are planning another roundtable with the chair of the Philippine National Renewable Energy Board on the 23rd of September. And for next year, we already have a study tour in the lineup and also another business mission. So please don't hesitate to contact me. The topic is energy efficiency and for the study tour. So I think we are considering to either go for virtual means if traveling is still restricted, but if not, we're happy to count you in. So that would be it from the German Philippine Chamber. And if you have any inquiries or questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. So we'll now go to questions asked by our participants. As I mentioned earlier, you may still ask your questions using the GoToWebinar app. There is a questions panel in the app where you can type in your questions. Please indicate to whom you are asking the question to so that we can properly address these questions to our participants, to our presenters, I'm sorry. So let me go to our first question from Vicente de Lima. He asks from IFC, please give an example of an energy efficiency project currently funded by IFC. So Pushkala.
Thank you, Mario, and thank you for the question as well. So perhaps a good example would be some of the work that we're doing in Thailand and in Vietnam, where we are indirectly financing. So since I work with the financial institutions group, our lending is directly to the FI, and they would then on-lend to the project. And the project that's kind of, I would say, the mainstay for Thailand and Vietnam has been in terms of modernizing of equipment. So this could be for either textile garments, it could be for food processing, but essentially to use the investment or the financing to modernize the equipment as compared to what the current factory has at the moment. So to make it a little bit more green. And the threshold, of course, is achieving a 50% improvement in energy efficiency by the new equipment as compared to the older one. Back to you, Mario.
Thank you, Pushkala. Let me go to the next question from Walter Alzate. I think this is for any of our presenters. Are there any significant movement within these energy efficiency projects on recycling materials that is currently being pursued? For example, recycled building materials for construction. Are there uh, maybe actions in your organizations involved in waste and that nexus between waste and energy in terms of recycling some of these materials and how it contributes to the greening of projects? To any of our presenters who would like to share their insight on this?
Mario, this is Alex. Let me pitch in. This may not be a bullseye answer, but as far as the Philippine Energy Efficiency Alliance, the ESCO industry, and all other energy efficiency market stakeholders, there's a small intersection with recycling of waste material. I think it'll be more of wasted forms of energy. So if a industrial enterprise, for example, has organic effluent, if it has an organic byproduct, if it's for a food and or beverage manufacturer that had the organic waste byproducts, then these are all being tapped as biomass, biogas sources that would fuel and be recycled back into the industrial process as useful energy, whether in power, heating, or cooling. Or there's actually a fourth polygeneration, and that they call it biofuels. So there's recycling of waste byproducts in industrial, agribusiness, and agro support industries is a huge. The sugar industry, for example, there's a lot of bagasse opportunity. The wastewater industry probably can produce methane, and which all could be converted to useful energy. In the heat intensive industry, we're capturing, this is not a material, but we're capturing waste heat. And waste heat could be recycled back into useful energy. So this is a form of recycling, some in tangible materials, the others are less tangible forms of energy.
Thank you very much, Alex. We have a next question from Romeo Pornea to Charlotte. We know that the Germany has very good in technology, Romeo shared, but what are the major renewable energies that you are now promoting to reduce dependencies on fuel oil? Charlotte?
Yeah, so what I read is developments in the wind energy and also in the solar sector. So if you give me a minute, I would have to check the figures. I don't know them by heart. I hope you don't mind.
Yes, go ahead, Charlotte.
So, for example, to further accelerate the transition to renewable energy, so the governing coalition intends to abolish the limitations. I think there was a capacity limitation for photovoltaic. So they are increasing the target, and also wind power shall be further enhanced. So I think the plan is targeting 40 gigawatt by 2040.
Thank you, Charlotte. We have a question to BJ from Arnel Cabanatan. What is the update with the Philippines, particularly with the cities Pasig, Parañaque, and Marikina, on their sustainability projects. Maybe you'd like to share, BJ?
Hello.
Yes, BJ.
Yes, currently we're not really privy to the other sustainable projects of Pasig, Parañaque, and Marikina, apart from the ones that we're working on with them through our projects through ACP and Accelerate and BEA. So most of the projects that we're doing with them are focused on the building sector, energy efficiency and conservation, and overall climate mitigation. So um, for Pasig, they already have their green building ordinance. They just need the implementing rules and regulations to implement it properly. So we're assisting them in that. We also help them with their GHG inventory. So we updated it last year based on their 2017 data. And again, we found out that 86% of their uh, emissions come from the building sector. And for Parañaque, we also found out that it's 37% of their GHG emissions. So we really focus on uh, the building energy sector and energy in general whenever we do our projects with them. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, BJ. Now for Alex, we again, since our participants today are our members as well as some non-members from the PHILGBC, and we recognize that energy efficiency is really a integral part in ensuring the greening of our projects. When should project proponents engage the members of PO2 when they're designing new building projects or when they're renovating their existing building projects? Alex?
Mario, let me try to understand your question. So you're asking when should they begin to engage or identify
Yes.
an energy efficiency opportunity? I
Yes.
think it's to answer your question, it's an ongoing thing. I think that all stakeholders realize that it's never going to be a one-shot deal. You're not going to invest in 2020 for your industrial plant or your commercial building and say you're energy efficient starting 2021. Yes, you may be energy efficient per market standard as 2021, but a few years down the road, you will lose that efficiency. So it's a dynamic, integral process. I'd like to borrow the line of the Philippine Department of Energy ever since they adopted this slogan in 2004, that energy efficiency and conservation should be a way of life. There's something behavioral about it. There's something that should be designed into your system, and that is why, as an indication of that, under your obligations under the law, energy audit is now mandatory every 3 years. So that indicates that yes, you could be energy efficient at one point, but you will lose that efficiency eventually because the rest of the world will be consuming energy more efficiently than you. So yes, technologies, behaviors, systems, solutions, the way businesses work, the way buildings function, uh, will all lose efficiency eventually. And that should be an ongoing process for an existing facility. As long as a building is alive, is functional, is operational, then energy efficiency should be mainstreamed as an ongoing. So yes, energy efficiency opportunities will be identified down the road for the rest of the usable life of that building or facility.
Thank you very much, Alex. Now we have a question for Pushkala. This is from Rosabella Jose from the National Home Mortgage Finance Corporation. You mentioned BDO green bonds issuance, which is unsecured. What are the recourse by investors? Pushkala?
Thank you very much, Mario. I'm not sure if I understood the question correctly, but let me try and explain. So most of the time, of course, it depends on the underlying asset itself that's being financed. If you have fairly straightforward transactions related to, most of the time, I would say, take an example of renewables or even green buildings, then of course the recourse is to the collateral or the asset itself. In many cases, like energy efficiency, that tends to get slightly more complicated. And also, if you look at newer areas that are coming up, which I had mentioned, like water or climate smart agri, and then there, of course, it becomes maybe a little bit harder to do a project finance model or to find secured collateral. And that's where you need to have a little bit of a blend as well to see if a balance sheet model or any kind of financing apart from project finance makes more sense. So I think it really depends on the underlying asset in itself. And overall, I would say from an issuer perspective and an investor perspective, I think people are also learning as they go in this space, but also gaining a little bit more confidence in terms of project asset types and what they are comfortable with and what they're not comfortable in terms of underwriting the credit or managing the risk. So I think the BDO example was fairly straightforward, but we're starting to see more and more green bonds in diversified assets where, of course, the collateral or the secured part of the deal is becoming, I would say, a little bit more complex. But I think this is not something to deter anyone who's working or who's looking at this area. This is exactly the trajectory that renewables went through maybe 4 or 5 years ago, but has now reached a point of maturity. So I think several of these other categories are also undergoing that evolution, but doesn't necessarily mean that it's not something positive, but rather that people are getting more comfortable with it. Thank you. Back to you, Mario.
Thank you, Pushkala. We have a question from Vicente de Lima to Alex. Um, he mentioned that energy efficiency projects involved in retrofitting old buildings and facilities help in reducing their energy consumption. What are the government regulations or incentives that would encourage building owners or facility owners to pursue energy efficiency in their projects? Alex?
Oh, thanks. That's a very good question. So the brand new law, the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, does many things. But I'll mention the two most relevant to your question. Number one, it sets obligations right now for all energy users consuming at least 500,000 kilowatt hours. And you and I know what 500,000 kilowatt hours a year in power and non-power. That is the equivalent. If you want to visualize, or that's a 2,500 square meter daytime office, air-conditioned office, or that is a standalone Jollibee or McDonald's restaurant. Okay, so anything larger than that would have obligations like mandatory energy audit, should report your power and non-power energy consumption, should employ a certified energy manager or certified energy conservation officer, and other obligations under the law. So that would drive energy efficiency as a mainstream activity. It's not going to be a nice to have. It's mandatory right now for any energy consuming meeting that certain threshold, and will have obligations. Otherwise, face up to $2 million in fines or up to 5 years in imprisonment, as the law states. But there are incentives. Yes, the incentive package was probably being, because we're going through a stage of fiscal incentive rationalization by government. So the energy efficiency incentives, unfortunately, were not as generous as that of renewable energy. We wish to correct that distortion in the years to come. But yes, as of today, the Board of Incentives, through the endorsement of the Department of Energy, will grant some years of income tax holiday, at least 4 years of income tax holiday. It could be more. And also duty-free importation of capital equipment as fiscal incentives, only to improve the commercial viability and equity returns of your investment in the energy efficiency retrofits. So yes, the law provides or sets obligations of energy end users. At the same time, it also provides energy tax-based fiscal incentives. And this is the new thing about it. Unlike renewables, which require 60% Filipino ownership, energy efficiency assets and access to incentives will apply even to 100% foreign-owned uh, ownership of energy efficiency projects. So yes, the law has provides all these.
Thank you very much, Alex. Now, shifting towards local government policies, um, one of our certified BERDE professionals, Vincent Cotoron from the DNREMP Caraga, asks, what do you think is a lacking policy in local governments that would leverage on the urgency in taking climate action, such as GHG reduction and transitioning to renewable energy? This is a question to BJ. What do you think is that gap in the policy for local governments?
In terms of policy, I think having a green building ordinance or code that is locally appropriate for the city is one good step to take. Like what PHILGBC has already done with Mandaue, also Mandaluyong, Quezon City, Pasig. They've already started with implementing their green building codes as the implementing the Philippine Green Building Code as well. So now that there is also the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Law Act, they will have to localize that as well. And like what Sir Alex has said, uh, the the staff has to be trained to be able to implement that law properly. So we've also been working with the DOE closely, and our project Accelerate in Pasig and Parañaque, we will be training staff from the the city on how to conduct basic energy audits. So they're not going to be the official energy officers, but we're already setting them up so that once the ANC law has taken effect, full effect, they already have a pool of technically trained staff that can be uh, assigned as the energy officer should they wish to be. So yeah, I think the green building ordinance fully implemented, not only for the ones uh, like mandated to do it, like the buildings with 10,000 square meter area are mandated to implement the Philippine Green Building Code. So even the buildings that are less than that should also have ways and options to implement energy efficiency and green building into their infrastructure. So I think that's.
Thank you, BJ. We have another question for Alex from Emilian Lawanza. They ask, right after the enactment of the RA 11285 last year, do you have any insight if there are reduced investments in coal-powered plants and any shift to more energy efficient plants? Alex?
Well, yeah, there's a I think this will be a gradual process. Governments around the world, including that of the Philippines, will slowly, in the next 10 years, awaken to the fact that energy efficiency will be treated as a primary resource. I'll give you a good example. The renewable energy potential in the renewable energy roadmap of the Department of Energy states that there will only be about 20,000 megawatts of installed capacity of renewable energy that could possibly displace coal-fired power by 2040. But people do not realize that energy efficiency has more than double that in the Philippines. And I would argue that that is across Asia and other emerging markets, that the energy efficiency potential of virtual generation, displacing coal, displacing fossil fuels, is twice or more than twice the potential capacity of renewables in any energy market. So in the Philippines, if we're looking at 20,000 megawatts of renewable energy to displace fossil fuels by 2040, in energy efficiency has the potential to displace up to 45,900 megawatts, and that is the PE2 economic model of both power and non-power. So including the, let's say, the transport sector, including the way industry uses fossil fuels or non-power energy sources. There will be a huge, more cost-effective opportunity to displace fossil fuel, including coal-fired power, in the energy mix in the next 20 years.
Thank you, Alex. Now shifting the discussion to another area, which is on the impact of the current pandemic. This is for Charlotte. Is there a direct impact of the pandemic on your current trade objectives and on the uh, green building materials market? Do you see any impact on this, Charlotte?
Um, Actually, I think the impact was noticed by our members, of course, who couldn't fulfill maybe initially in the first months of ECQ their maintenance services, for example, when you have to travel to far-flung areas with the permits, etc. But I think all these got addressed and are improved. With regard to the trade promotion, we are actually positively surprised. I mean, in July, we had our virtual mission with 5 German companies, and the feedback from the Philippine side was very like positively overwhelming. So we had, I think, around 10 to 12 business meetings per company. So I think even though we are in challenging times, the industry actually has so much potential, and that it's for us, I think from the chamber perspective, a way forward. It could even be as similarly as I mentioned on my slide, where it's included in the recovery package of the German government. It could also hold potential in the Philippines for the recovery of the economy. But that's just my personal note.
Thank you, Charlotte. I think to end our discussion session, maybe I'd like to ask this to each of our presenters. How can the members of the Philippine Green Building Council and project proponents of green building projects engage your organizations to achieve their objective in developing green buildings? Maybe I can start with you again, Charlotte, for the question.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we would be happy if you reach out to us or you reach out to Philippine Green Building Council. We are in close contact with PHILGBC, and we usually reach out when we have incoming projects or events. So please don't hesitate to contact us, and we are happy to see if we can even support you in your project or connect you with German businesses or technology providers. Just reach out to us.
Thank you, Charlotte. BJ, the same question.
Yes, so we mainly work with local governments. So if you're a local government or want to work with local governments, you can approach ITLE Southeast Asia so that we can connect you to the right people. So we can develop projects targeted to the local governments, and we will, again, find funders to help fund those projects. So yeah, please contact Iglesias for any idea.
Thank you, BJ. Pushkala, how can our members engage your organization for their green building projects?
Thank you very much, Mario. I think on the IFC side, of course, we wear many hats, as I've mentioned during my presentation as well. So we work very closely with organizations that are related to the policy or institutional framework setting. We're also working with FIs, with corporates, with developers. So I think every stakeholder in the market, there's some kind of inroad or some way where we can add value or we could help. And I would definitely be, very interested to connect with the participants on this in this session if there's anything that we could do, either in terms of capacity building, knowledge sharing, best practices, of course, our Edge tool, as I mentioned earlier, and also definitely on the financing or the green bond space as well. Thank you, Mario.
Thank you very much, Pushkala. Alex?
Sure, certainly. Markets transform, or the green building market will continue to transform because people are working together. And we believe the Philippine Energy Efficiency Alliance, the Asia Pacific ESCO Industry Alliance, we know that we have to work more closely with the Philippine Green Building Council and all other market stakeholders. We will have to work closely with the German Philippine Chamber. We will have to work closely with ICLE. We will have to work closely with IFC and other multilaterals, because funding, technology, solutions, services, policy, they're all part of market transformation. And we make things happen because we work together. Technology is connected with capital. Capital is connected with business models. Business models are connected with procurement regulations. So they're all woven together, and we have to work together. Now, the Green Building Council, there's a lot of achievement as far as greening new construction or new buildings. I think the next big challenge right now is how do we work with greening the existing building stock? So how do we work with national and local government, the city halls, the city hospitals, the city schools, municipal buildings, the public markets? So how do we bring it down to local building? How do we flow finance? How do we flow technology solution services? How do we make ESCOs get the lack of credit of worthiness, that barrier, out of the equation and get it guaranteed with new financial products and guarantee products? So yes, it's there's so much to work together for. We have to transform the market together, and PE2, APIA, looks forward to working with Philippine Green Building Council and all other green and sustainability movements, campaigns, organizations, and financial institutions.
Thank you very much, Alex. And thank you once again to our presenters for sharing your insight and your work from your respective organizations in achieving green building and sustainability in our built environment. So for if our participants still have questions to our presenters, please still send them in the questions panel. We'll be collating all of these questions and sending them to our presenters so that they can engage you directly and answer your questions maybe through email, so that we are able to connect you with some of these resources available now. So for our next session for the Building Green Digital Conference, this week, tomorrow, we'll be having episode 6 for the assessors, where we will be conducting a training for BERDE assessors, for individuals that will be involved in the assessment and certification process for the BERDE Green Building Rating System. And this is a by invitation only activity. But on Thursday, episode 7, we will be hosting the technology episode, where we will be featuring some of the current best practices, best technologies and products available in the market to support green building projects in the country. We will also be launching the Green Building Procurement Hub, which is the online platform for available green building products, services, and even green building projects for lease that will be officially launched by the Philippine Green Building Council. So if you are interested in participating in these upcoming episodes, please scan the QR code on your screen now, or you may contact the PHILGBC National Secretariat at events@philgbc.org. So once again, thank you everyone for participating in today's episode, and we'll see you online for the upcoming episodes as well as the rest of the episodes for the Building Green 2020 Digital Conference. Thank you everyone.